Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's that time, my favorite time of the week, Thursday, 12 o'clock, where we have this special date on Radio Zindagi. And this is Miss Rennu from Genius Kids bringing you voices. And I always begin by thanking, of course, Neeraj and Seba of Radio Zindagi and my favorite RJ, Ira, who help us put this show together. So thanks for tuning in. And thank you all for all your feedback, for listening in. The show is turning out to be really successful. And I'm just so honored to be the host for the event. Today, we have a very sensitive topic, a topic probably that most people don't like to talk about, and we feel it's necessary, and we have an amazing group of panelists that are here to join us, to educate us and empower us on this subject. Drug abuse, substance abuse, everyone knows what this is, but if I look up in the dictionary, what does it mean? It refers to the use of certain chemicals for the purpose of creating pleasurable effects on the brain, but it's not limited to that. It is estimated that there are over 190 million drug users around the world, and the problem has been increasing at alarming rates, especially amongst the young adults and the teens. And apart from the long-term damage that it does to the body, drug addicts also give themselves prone to risk by using needles, contracting HIV, hepatitis B, C, all this other good stuff. Many people, including myself, I'm guilty of this, are very judgmental and don't understand why or how people become addicted to drugs. Then myself as a pharmacist, I used to specialize in controlled drugs. I could never comprehend why people needed to take drugs. As humans, of course, we are judgmental, as I just said, and we tend to start judging people and assuming that there's something wrong with them. In reality, drug addiction is a complex disease, and it requires help, and it requires education, and all of us need to understand the process of what's involved. Let's remember, friends, addiction begins with a thought that something physical can fill the emptiness of something inside us. And it is a family disease, because if one person uses it, the whole family is affected. And on that note, let's begin our show by educating ourselves. And please never say it's never going to happen to me or my kids, because we don't know what tomorrow holds. So on that note, I'd like to invite and introduce our amazing panelists. In no particular order, I'll begin with April Rivero. April is Executive Director of the National Coalition Against Prescription Drug Abuse, which is known as NCAPDA. It's a nonprofit organization she formed in 2010 that is headquartered in San Ramon, right here in our backyard. She leads NCAPDA's efforts to prevent prescription drug-related substance abuse disorders and overdose deaths throughout the community, education, policy change, and legislation advocacy. She retired as a program management director from Lucent Technology after 30 years of service, and holds a bachelor's degree in business administration and a master's in project management. So welcome, April.
Thank you very much. Please.
I could spend a whole show just introducing all your background. So thank you. And for those who want to learn more about her, we'll give you some information at the end of the show. Next, we have Monica Kamran. She's the founder of Inner Sanctuary Wellness. Monica Kamran is a Reiki healer, stress management, corporate wellness, meditation, and mindfulness coach, and emotion code practitioner. She's also the co-founder of Luminous Pathways, a holistic service for children with special needs. So welcome, Monica.
Thank you. Glad to be on the show, Rennu. Thank you.
Next, we have Patty Hoyt. She is a prevention coordinator at Discovery Counseling Center, facilitating ADAPT San Ramon, which is alcohol and drug abuse prevention team. Since 2013, they work with the community to reduce underage drinking of marijuana use and prescription drug abuse. So welcome, Patty.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
Then we have with us, of course, Neelam I want to make sure I say the name correctly. Chalia, is that right?
That is correct.
Did I say that correctly? Good. Neelam Chalia is the reigning Mrs. Washington America, so congratulations for that. There's no doubt, it's evident. Why? Mm-hmm. The first Indian American woman to win the state title and go to nationals, Mrs. America. Her platform is focused on reducing drug experimentation, addiction, and overdose. She's also the brand ambassador to Victoria Segal's Foundation, which raises awareness on drug abuse and the addiction in our community. So welcome, Neelam.
Thank you, Rick. Glad to be here and be part of this important discussion.
And last but not least, we have a young lady with us, Ankita. She's a rising junior at Dublin High School and an intern at the National Coalition Against Prescription Drug Abuse. as well as being a returning member of the Youth Advisory Board for the Alameda County Office of Education's Tobacco Use Prevention Education Program. So welcome, Ankita.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm honored to have, oops, I just disappeared on the show. Sorry about that. Oops, where did my Zoom go? Can you guys see me?
We can.
Okay, I'm struggling to see everybody on, so I'll just bring, I've got to fix this up over here. So I'm going to go ahead and begin the show as I try and figure out what happened to my Zoom. So I'm going to begin with you, April. April, what kind of prescription drugs are out there? Let's begin with that. What kind of prescription drugs are out there which are used that are addictive?
Well, I like to talk about three categories. One would be painkillers, opioid painkillers, and this would be drugs like Oxycontin, Vicodin, Percocet, Norco, as a very short example. Sedatives, that would include drugs like Xanax, Ativan, Ambien even as a sleep aid. And then stimulants, we find some people getting hooked on stimulants that would include Adderall and Ritalin typically. And they would be people who don't have a need for them medically to treat ADHD. They're just using them for other purposes, non-medical purposes.
Wow. I'd never think of that, you know, you just never think that's something that you use for other ailments you can become addictive to.
Yeah,
so Monica, what do you think the reasons are? Why are teens and youth taking to substance abuse and drugs? I mean, what's the need for that?
Well, there are several reasons, but in my experience, one of the main reasons is the inability to manage and regulate their emotions. As a society, sometimes the message that we are giving to our teens is not of self-worth and self-compassion. The focus is too much on, say, the external appearance. Another reason is that, see, drugs interact with the neurochemistry of the brain to produce feelings of pleasure. And teens have a hard time dealing with distress. It's also a very competitive society. So dealing with the competition and to perform better is that reason why they get into drugs.
Yes, and I think as especially here in the Bay Area and in certain areas with the schools being so competitive and the academic pressure we put on children, and I'm sure Ankita will address that, especially with Fremont, Dublin, San Ramon. What can I tell you? We all know that.
Absolutely, totally agree with that.
So Patty, we go to vaping. I mean, I'm so new at this, you know, I could never understand. And my daughter just tells me not even to have a conversation. She just says, Mom, you're clueless about this and don't make your comments on this. But what are the addictive substances used in vaping? Because, you know, when I talk to kids, they say there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly okay. It's just like, you know, I don't know. They just think it's okay. And I have a big problem seeing anyone smoking.
Right. Well, that's partly what is the problem with vaping is you think it's just a flavor when in fact it's nicotine. It's the same addictive substance that's in leaf tobacco. And because it's disguised in flavors, especially our kids are getting hooked because they don't understand the addictive quality of nicotine that's in it. In fact, some of the vaping devices have as much nicotine as 2 packs of cigarettes. So kids are smoking 2 packs of cigarettes in a single vaping device.
I do know that when this whole thing started, you just saw all these vaping stores just appear suddenly in every corner. It was, Neelam, tell us what kind of programs can be introduced in schools and campuses. I mean, you know, and our kids are really going to take to those programs to educate children about the disastrous effects of all these substances.
Yeah. So I believe our schools and campuses can implement various programs that can help kids stay away from drugs. These programs can be based on educational content. They can have guest speakers, police officers, community leaders talk about the bad stories of, you know, people using drug and how they implicate their life, but also on the content of the program. The program should have a right balance of information and help children develop the social skills as well as self-control and stress management. I think they are very important in developing the programs.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I have to say I have a great group of panelists today that just stay right on the point. I love it. I absolutely love it. What else? When you have women, we know exactly what we need to say. So what can I tell you, right? Ankita, I've often wondered this. I know that, you know, especially as a parent myself, we put so much academic pressure on our children. To what extent do you think peer pressure or parents are responsible for getting kids into drugs and vaping? Because most parents are in denial and say, well, my child's never going to do this. They're a straight A student.
I think as far as parental pressure goes, because our focus is on education, especially being from a South Asian background, it's that mental health isn't something that is talked about in our families. And it is because of that lack of conversation between the child and the parent, where we're not talking about mental health. We're not talking about the stress and the depression that the student could be facing because of all the pressure that they have on top of them. Because the student knows that, they know their expectations, they know what their parents want out of them, but they have no outlet if they can't talk to their parents. And because of that and the lack of conversation, they turn to these substances such as prescription drugs and vaping and marijuana as something that they could use to help themselves, but they don't understand that it is going to do more harm than help them. And peer pressure is one of the biggest factors, because people are seen as cool for doing it, but they're not. And peer pressure is on top of that just adding to the problem.
I'm going to ask you a very straight up question, and feel free to answer it if you can. And this is totally, and again, because it's a South Asian radio show, I'm curious to know, because being in the education business, I always hear, and having a lot of South Asians as my clients, I always hear them say, my child will never do this. Indian kids don't do this. Straight up, do Indian kids take drugs and vape?
Yes, they do. At our school, we have, like, during finals week, you will smell it in the hallways. And we have a big proportion of South Asian and Asian kids at our school, and it's finals week, and they are stressed out of their minds because of their parents and themselves. And it's like they hide it because they have no other option.
Mhm.
Thank you for answering that. And for all those who are tuned in, you're listening to Voices on Radio Zindagi, and we're talking about a very important subject, drug abuse. And one of the reasons why we brought this on today is we, especially South Asians, love to pretend this doesn't exist in our community. Wake up, parents, it does. And you just heard what Ankita said. So your kid could be a straight A student. It doesn't matter. They could be doing this. So it all boils back to, if you hear what she said and what everyone else said, communication and conversation, which is what we're doing today on Radio Zindagi on Voices. So going back to you, April, how are children getting their hands on these things? I mean, I would assume this is difficult.
No, it's not, unfortunately. So think about your own house. Do you yourself, all of us on this call, do any of us have a lockbox where we put our medication? Chances are we could say no, right? So the reality is parents get prescribed, they don't lock up their meds, and kids know what to look for. It's community education with, peers, and they know that Xanax you can get, a buzz off of and chill out with. They know you can get high off of painkillers. So bottom line is it's our medicine cabinet, it's friends, it's family. There's also, unfortunately, a pretty bad, let's just say, street opportunity too. So anything that they get from their friends may or may not have come directly from a pharmacy. It could be from a street dealer in the end. And any of the medication that would come from a street dealer is potentially laced with fentanyl now. And we'll probably talk about that down path here in our conversation. But fentanyl, it can be absolutely deadly with just a few specks of fentanyl included in maybe what looks to be a Xanax pill or whatever. So friends, family, either legitimately through a pharmacy or otherwise from the street.
Thank you. And for those who are listening in, if you want to post questions on Facebook or you want to call into the studio, you can. Our number is 510-657-1170, or you can post a comment on Facebook or a question. We'll be happy to read this. We do have a comment from Amitabh Mohan. Thanks for always participating in our show, Amitabh. And he says, a person with an addiction uses a substance or engages in a behavior for which the rewarding effects provides a compelling incentive to repeat the activity despite detrimental consequences. And I can see everyone's nodding their head.
Yep.
Vakil Kulvinder Singh has a question. Do experts have advice for those drinking or taking antidepressants and marijuana for stress? So I'll pose that back to you again, April.
Well, gosh, if they're using that kind of combination, that first of all is a huge red flag for me because of the central nervous system potential depressant factor where their breathing can actually slow down and potentially stop by combining a sedative, for instance, with alcohol. Both of those tend to slow down breathing individually. And so, I mean, my suggestion would be don't combine. There is a multiplier effect, so you need to not combine those. Everything should be in moderation, certainly with adults and for youth, with the developing brain issue that, you know, is reality. Until we're 25 years old or beyond, we don't have a fully developed brain, and any of those substances can have a detrimental effect on brain development. So it's avoidance, it's minimizing as adults, it's not combining with potentially deadly combination substances that can, you know, counteract each other and be more potent together.
Thank you for that. Monica,
Yes.
a very important question. Why do you think it's stigma or ignorance? What is it that stops us parents from actually seeking help for our children?
It is both, Renu, it is both. There is a lot of social stigma attached to seeking help, and especially in the South Asian community. The fear of not being accepted by the community, your own peers, your friends, is really big. And then many of us recognize ourselves, our identity is our child's actions. We recognize ourselves through where our child is studying, you know, where is their place of education. And of course, like as you mentioned earlier, that my child can never do it. It can never happen. And to add to it, the ignorance of the fact that substance abuse is very common. And there are lots of others who are facing the same situation. And a very big piece I have to add is that parents who are migrants, such as me too, we grew up in a different culture where mindfulness practices, meditation were part of life. Mental health was very important, and that was part of your daily life, which is a little different here. You know, there was community, friends around you. You could talk what you wanted to, which is not the opportunity here. Beliefs are different. And that is why mental health is not recognized as part of essential self-care.
Thank you. You brought up some very, very valid points here. Yes, thank you. Being at an event where a child had brought me a cup of tea, and he wanted me to put sugar in the tea, and I said no, and he got very angry and he pushed the cup at me and said back, and I to myself I said, oh my God, what an angry young man. And it was so strange. I think my daughter was like 14 at the time, and afterwards in the car she says, Mom, he was high, and I could not even understand what she was talking about. I said, what was he high on? And I assumed he was alcohol, you know, immediately. And it was strange that she was able to pick on that, but I just put him down to be an angry man who was having a bad day.
Right.
But yeah, so education is so important on this. Patty, my question to you is, I know we talked about how this is accessible, but I mean, it's, and you know, April mentioned even street vendors, but so as a prevention coordinator, how are you involved in preventing or reducing this substance
Thank you
abuse,
very much
especially
for asking that, but I'm going to go just a tad off topic, even though we've been so good so far.
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead.
I just wanted to tag on to what the question posed to April about what do you do, you know, when people are using these substances for stress. But one of the things we also always recommend is find something else. Find your meditation, your yoga, your big hike, your run, your swim, whatever it might be. There's other ways to deal with stress than substances. And so we try to encourage that at all points in time as well. So I just wanted to go back and address that part too. But as far as prevention work, one of the main things is reducing access. April talks about locking up your medications. When my kids were young, I knew that I was supposed to lock up my alcohol. So, you know, when they get of age, I'm locking my alcohol. I didn't know about medication. I didn't know that. And now with marijuana legalized, that should all be stuff that is added into your lockbox, is keep your home access away. But we also try and reduce it in other people's homes, there are ordinances called social host ordinances. So in prevention, we're out working on policies, and a social host ordinance holds the host of a party liable where alcohol, cannabis, and in some ordinances, prescription drugs are provided to somebody underage. They get cited and fined for doing that. So that kind of helps everybody understand the importance of keeping these substances out of the hands, especially abuse, because there is policies. And around vaping, there is currently legislation going through the California legislature, SB 793, which would ban flavored tobacco products, the various e-juices and flavored tobaccos that are so attractive to kids. That's currently going through our legislation right now. So those kinds of things all are very helpful in the prevention world. If you can't get to it, it's really hard to do it.
Thank you for that. Neelam, I believe you're involved in a foundation. How did you get associated with this foundation? Tell us a little bit about it, and why did you get involved?
So I got involved with Victoria Siegel Foundation, and as you have mentioned earlier, Victoria Siegel Foundation raises awareness about drug abuse and addiction in teens and adults. I got associated with the foundation through my pageant, my participation in the pageant, and the mission of the foundation touched my heart. And I decided, how can I better help the foundation? How can I help save our next Bill Gates from falling into the hands of drug abuse and addiction? And so I have made it my mission to help the teens and students in my community to know the effects of the drug abuse and to be able to define their goals in life. And as other guests have mentioned in my message, community studies have shown family, they are supposed to come together and address this problem rather than talking it as a taboo, you know.
Absolutely, thank you. Ankita, so I'm curious, when I did this with my kids. I would tell them, oh, if you know someone, you don't want to come close to them and don't have them home. So how do you help others that are in trouble when your parents are already telling you to stay away from them? I'm just curious to know as a parent, because that's a typical answer that most parents are going to tell their kids. Avoid, stay away, make a new friend. And that could be your best friend in trouble. So what's your advice to all the kids listening today and also the parents?
The problem lies in the parents saying stay away, because they already hold that prejudice and that stigma against that someone who is using a substance is a bad person, while substance abuse disorder is a mental illness. This person could be struggling with something really important that they are not getting help for. So breaking down that stigma, especially in the South Asian community, is something that is very, very important, and understanding the issue as a whole. Because if we look at someone who is using a substance as just a normal person who could have a mental disorder, we can get them the help that they need instead of having them accidentally overdose on something, and then we lose another life to a growing epidemic.
But how do you pick up that phone, Ankita, and tell, for example, if I know that another child is taking substance abuse or vaping and their parent doesn't know, how do you approach that parent and tell them without knowing that they're going to say, no, my kid doesn't do that, and how dare you interfere in my personal life? How do you cope with something like that?
I think that a lot of schools, they have counselors for this kind of information. I know Delbina has a substance abuse counselor. So getting an adult that specializes in this to come talk to the parent and help them understand what's going on with their child, because a lot of times the child will try to have this conversation with their parent, or another parent will come, they get shut down very shortly. It will not be a long conversation, because the parent's image is the child's image. That is how it's projected. And the South Asian community is centered around "Log kya kahenge," right? What will other people say? That is the South Asian community slogan, right?
The nail on the head.
So breaking all of that down and having a specialized adult have that conversation.
Thank you. And I want, again, thank you all of you for being involved in this conversation, because it is a sensitive conversation. So going back to you, April, what's your story? Why have you picked this cause? Why are you involved in this foundation? Tell us a little bit about this whole purpose that you're involved in, because you seem very committed.
It's been for the last 10 years. So on December 18th, 2009, my son Joey, who was at that time a senior at Arizona State University, 5 months away from graduating, suddenly without any warning died from a prescription drug-related overdose.
I'm so sorry to hear
It
that.
folded, yeah, thank you. I mean, as you can imagine, it's absolutely devastating. And it still is 10 years later. But what we learned really quickly was that it was from prescription medications that he should never have been prescribed. One of the things we haven't talked about is one of the primary ways, if not the most prevalent way of getting hooked on any of these prescription drugs is through prescribing. So for a legitimate health problem, it could be a sports injury that a child has, playing football or whatever the case may be. It could be from an oral surgery situation where the kid is having their wisdom teeth removed. The bottom line is we still have a lot of prescribing going on. So these painkillers, or even in the case of a mental health issue where maybe they're super anxious and a doctor may think that Xanax or another kind of sedative would be of help, prescribing does get often in the way of, avoiding these substances and the addiction that can follow. So in Joey's case, he went to a doctor, 9 days later he was dead. He was prescribed super high potency drugs, a lot of them. And he was out with his friends and basically ended up mixing 1 pill of Xanax with a 1.5 pills of oxycodone, which is a painkiller, alcohol that was just over the legal limit for driving. That's all it took to shut down a 21-year-old healthy male's life and end his life, forever. So the reason for me starting this organization was because I was completely uneducated, like a lot of parents still are. Everyone I spoke to after this happened, we were very open and honest about, what happened to Joey from the beginning. Nobody knew anything more than I did about how dangerous these medications could be. So that's been a driver for me to educate community members, do what I can in terms of policy change, legislative advocacy to avoid other families going through this permanent situation we're dealing with, the loss of our youngest son, Joey.
I'm so sorry to hear this. I just got the chills just listening to you as a mom. And I really, really commend and appreciate the fact that you're able to come out so openly and share your story with everyone. And I hope everyone's listening because, as you said, we're unaware of it and no one ever thinks it's going to happen to us.
No, I would never have guessed this would be something we would be contending with, Joey.
And I think kids take it pretty lightly, even if they'll pop a couple of pills and have a drink, not realizing the seriousness. Even as adults, we do that. We'll have a migraine, we'll have a couple of pills and we'll go out for drinks with our friends, not realizing what the impact can be.
And if I could add to it, because
sure.
Everybody's talking about their families. The foundation that I work with, it is created by a couple who actually lost their teenage daughter to a drug overdose, and they are an affluent family. They thought this can never happen in our family. We are so close together. We are a supportive family. So, having an open conversation with your kids, and as Ankita mentioned, that, it's just not saying that what people will say, just having an open conversation with your kids, be a supportive family. That is very important. A family and community together can solve this issue. And
I just wanted to add on just a quick one, and that is that we had those conversations with our son, illegal drugs, alcohol, very open conversations. We didn't know to add prescription drugs to the conversation. And I don't think most parents even still know to do that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Very important. Yeah.
So on that note, April, then shouldn't the doctors also be educated and be a little sensitive to what they're prescribing out to young kids, even if they're young adults and they're over, they don't need the approval of the parents. Still, shouldn't the doctors be a little sensitive to this?
Yes, and I would say for over the past 10 years that has improved. I wouldn't say it's perfect now, but there has been a major push to get doctors to understand that prescribing is resulting in these horrible, downstream impacts. I don't think they had any window to that. They didn't understand. They also haven't been properly educated and completely educated about addiction, how to recognize it in their patients, how to talk to patients, where to send them to get professional support. So there's a lot of work to be done, but our organization is working with, for instance, the East County, the prescription direct. There's another effort, the East, what is it, Patty? East Bay Safe Prescribing Coalition. There we go. That is very focused on the medical community and how we can get the word out and get doctors educating and reducing the prescribing patterns. That's going to help to access, as Patty mentioned.
So is your foundation a place where kids call and ask for help, parents call? Tell me a little bit about the foundation.
Yeah, we don't have an open hotline per se. That is available through county services, but anyone can certainly reach out. We do have an opportunity to reach out to us via phone or also through email. We're always looking for volunteer support. We have a speakers bureau. We have our intern group, Ankita's a member of. We have a lot of opportunity to engage. And then just, if everybody understands basically what they need to do, lock up their medications and talk to their kids, get educated and share this information. Every single person can make a difference without actually having to formally connect with an organization, although we can use that support.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very important point, because we do kind of, even when you take your prescription medicines, kind of leave them on the counter, think it's okay, especially the ones for your headache, the codeine. Yeah, I'm still trying
little kids, we didn't talk about that. Little kids can get a hold of them too. You leave them on the counter. Little kids, we have a lot of poisonings that go on throughout our country because of that. I have a friend whose dog overdosed. The dog got a hold of their medications. They left on the counter after they came home from the pharmacy. So lock them up, get them out of sight.
Out of sight, absolutely. So moving on, Monica, I know you're involved in Reiki. I know a little bit about this. So how are you educating people about using mindfulness and stress management, especially now, COVID? I think everybody could do with some mindfulness right now.
I have been really busy these past few days, Rennu, because everybody's been cooped up inside. It's been a time of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety. And I've been conducting a lot of mindfulness meditation classes online. And I think the main education that I would like to give people is that the very thought that mindfulness meditation is not just for people who are on a spiritual path. It's a way of life. You can even do a mindfulness exercise for a minute and still benefit from it. You don't have to be sitting down for 2 hours. And organizations like NCAPDA, I'm part of NCAPDA, and connecting to other nonprofit organizations have helped me spread that word, that how lessening the pain and discomfort associated with detox and withdrawal process when it comes to drugs can be done with the help of energy healing, anxiety, just breathing techniques, a whole lot of alternative healing.
So what exactly, I'm curious to know, as a person who has no ability to sit down, you can already figure out I'm bouncing off the walls, and no, I'm not on anything right now. It's just some energy that I have inside me. How would, if I'm really stressed right now about COVID, and other people are too, how would 2 minutes of Reiki help? What would I be doing?
Reiki is basically given by an energy healer or a practitioner who is trained and certified. So they are basically putting your body in a state of calmness. When the body is in a relaxed state, only then it can start healing. That is how Reiki works. So we regulate the flow of energy in the body. But as you are saying, for somebody like a energetic person like you, simple meditation techniques would work. Let me try out one. If you keep your hand on your heart and just deep breathe. Just breathe deeply. It's a very comforting gesture. We hardly do that. Or if I tell you, put your hand on your cheek like this. It is something so loving. You're just being kind to yourself. So these are little gestures, little mindfulness techniques that I teach and promote that can really help you to get out of anxiety and stress. And when it comes to drugs, I have worked with a lot of people who have just crossing that fine line, where they feel depressed, and just if the intensity of anxiety and depression increases a little more, they would start taking the pills. So that's where all these alternative healing therapies come in.
Thank you for that. And I definitely will try this. Maybe both at the same time. Thank you for that. So Neelam, please share some of your initiatives on combating this drug epidemic.
So since I've been involved with the foundation helping raise awareness, and I thought, what better can I do to further help the foundation? The first thing that I'm working on is having drug-free clubs in middle and high schools in my local school district. And the motive of this club is the students who offer themselves for random drug testing will be provided with perks and incentives. And that way they can show themselves as role model for other students that if you choose a drug-free life, you get these incentives and perks. So that's one of my initiative. Second initiative I'm working on is my corporate gift match initiative. So big corporations in my state and in your state as well, like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, they do not have Victoria Segal Foundation registered as an employee matched donation. So when an employee makes a donation to a charity, the corporation matches the donation and the donation doubles. And as all my guests would agree that we need a lot of financial support in this sector. So I'm working on that initiative as well. So these are two of my initiatives to help combat the drug abuse.
Wonderful, thank you. And at the end of the show, if everyone can also, of course, provide their contact so people can contact you easily. My question to you, Patty, is one of the listeners has sent in a question. What is the current law on vaping and marijuana in schools? And what do police do when they do find a student in possession? Could you educate us on that?
Yes, I assume it's the same everywhere. I can only speak to specifically my school district, but it is California state law that they're drug-free schools. You can't have alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, and vaping is a tobacco product. You can't have those on campus. But as our youth can attest to, especially with vaping, it is there. Alcohol gets snuck into football games, in water bottles. It's all there. So the law is that it can't be. And at the San Ramon Valley Unified School District, they were suspending youth for bringing it on campus. That's the rules. Well, with vaping, we were suspending a lot of kids weren't at school. So they had to move more of a restorative justice model, a model where you get some education about it. You get some intervention as to what were you thinking about when you decided to vape? What's behind the use of it versus just punishment? Because that's not working. If as we talked at the beginning, even you said your child thought there's nothing wrong with it. Well, that's what they think. So giving them the opportunity, they get caught, giving them the opportunity to learn about the dangers of it and the fact that they are getting hooked on nicotine. In 2015, in California, we almost had youth tobacco use almost knocked out. And this vaping device called Juul came out in 2015, skyrocketed. Right. And all of a sudden, we've got youth using again, and we didn't before. So the education on it's really important. But what the staff and police do is they confiscate the devices. But we also know it's readily available to find somewhere else. But it is illegal to have on campus, and there are really good efforts now to educate versus punish.
Do the schools do random checks and bags for students? Are they allowed to? Can they do that?
Do you want to talk to that?
Oh, okay, Ankita, I'll have you answer that.
Yeah, she looked like she had her mouth open like she was.
We have drug dogs that come on schools, so it's usually around fourth period. They're like, you're not allowed to go to the bathroom. The drug dogs are out. So sometimes when they'll come and if they sit on like a backpack, that means that they can smell something in there. So we do have drug dogs. And then on like homecoming dances, I'm guessing for prom too and senior ball, you like pick a stick out of a cup, and if your stick is black, you get breathalyzed, so it's like random. So they have that as well, but there is the chance of like having a false positive. But going back to like a little bit on access and suspension, the reason that suspension as a system doesn't work is because if a child goes home and gets suspended, they're just going to go use again. They're not being watched. Yeah. So that is the main problem with suspension. It's not doing anything to help the issue. And access, like Dublin High, a vape shop is a 10 to 15 minute walk away. People can go during lunch. I've seen kids go during lunch. And Juul came out in 2015. Now we have copycat brands. We have something called Puff. and you see the wrappers in the parking lot, it's like disposable. So the new trend is disposable ones, because Juul you have to refill with cartridges. Now with Puff, you use it and you throw it out. So disposable is kind of what is, I guess, the new trend. And access is so easy because they don't do ID checks, or someone who's older will go in and give it to this little, like the younger kids.
But Ankita, let me ask you, as it is, it's hard enough to communicate with a teenager and someone in high school. Being a parent and having gone through that, mom and dad are always wrong, right? How do you tell a child that you shouldn't be vaping? I mean, they're going to think it's cool, like you talked about peer pressure. So what kind of movements and programs are being done in schools, because we know kids don't listen.
So freshman health is where they do the whole substance abuse unit, where they educate all the freshmen about prescription drugs, marijuana use, vaping, and California state requirements is that a student does have to take a health class to graduate high school. It's part of our graduation requirements. And I think parents may not always be the best option to talk to a child, because the child is like, no, my parent is wrong, I'm right? You already have that argument going. So Dublin has a wellness center, which is, we're very lucky to have one, where we have a substance abuse counselor. Using a resource like that is really what we need to start doing, because we have someone who they're equal, right? They're not favored to one side or another. Their only goal is to help the student.
Thank you. Yeah, puts a lot of thought into this. Yes.
I'm just gonna, it's back to the whole conversation though about, being open and honest and talking about it. Parents, if they're educated about it, that can be a big help towards, combating your kids saying, you don't know. You can say, hello, I have this fact, this brochure, whatever it is, right? You could have some information. Setting good guidelines yourself, saying what you approve and disapprove on. Studies show all the time that regardless of what we as parents think our kids think of us, they do value our opinion and don't want our disapproval. So that's going back to having that communication, because it does matter to our kids what we think and what we approve and disapprove of.
Thank you for saying that, because I preach that all day long. I always tell parents that you are the primary educators, and I'm actually writing a book on this about how a parent should stop controlling and start coaching. That's my whole basis of the book, that as parents we have to forget about the way we were raised and think back to now this generation. I mean, I was raised without a cell phone. I didn't even know what a pager was, and I knew how to play in the playground and make friends. And I lived in fear of my parents, not only for academic grades, but knowing that I was going to do something wrong. But I had the open conversation. And I think that's what we lack. We get also so busy with our lifestyles. So, but thank you for saying that. Parents, you are ultimately responsible. You cannot blame schools. You cannot blame other kids and say they are in bad company and try and move your child from one friend to another. Ultimately, the responsibility is yours. So as we get ready to wrap up our show, and this, as you can see, the hour goes by so quickly, I'm going to move into our closing statements. And what I'd like to do is if everybody can share their thoughts on this subject for a couple of minutes, and something useful you can give out to parents as well. So my first question, and then your closing statement will be, of course, to April. And again, April, thank you so much for all the work that all of you are actually doing in this. It's phenomenal. My question is, how can parents recognize and understand the signals that the children are experimenting? I mean, I know it was an unusual case of overdose, but when somebody's actually experimenting, what are the signs? And then your closing statement.
Okay, yeah, this can be a little tricky because, teens are thought to have sometimes, erratic behavior and things, they're not predictable. So the bottom line is, I think that if you notice things are changing, they're different. Physiological changes, all of a sudden they're not taking showers. You have to, where they used to be really clean. If they've changed their friend set, it's clear that they're not hanging out with the kids they used to hang out with. And maybe there's a sketchiness about those other friends. They used to love to play soccer, and all of a sudden they don't care about it anymore. They're losing weight. There are visual signs, there are emotional signs, maybe outbursts, that are not usual for them. Could be suggestive of stimulant abuse. There's all sorts of things. Just tuning in, paying attention, having conversation, listening, listening is a really big thing, I think, because I think we're often in a projection mode. We're talking and not really taking the time to listen to our teens. So that's really important, because they sometimes will share, I think, a lot more than you expect them to about the issues that they're dealing with if you just are receptive and you're not judgmental. So it's really recognizing those. And then another really important one, a question that I was hoping would come, would be about opioids in particular. Opioids are, in my mind, the most important thing for parents to know about right now. They're often, again, in those medicine cabinets, but for kids that get hooked on them, and then ultimately the trajectory can be to use heroin or illicit forms of opioids that you can get off the street. When that starts to happen, you're dealing potentially with fentanyl. Fentanyl is an extremely potent manufactured opioid that is showing up in pretty much every community. A little speck of it can kill you if it shows up as part of the drug they think they're taking that they assume is clean and it's not. It can be a death sentence. It's very devastating. The good news is there is an anecdote, though. Opioid overdoses can be overturned with something called naloxone, which is a medication that can be delivered either through an injection, through a needle, or otherwise the new form of it is through a nasal spray called Narcan, Narcan. That medication is available over the counter. You can literally walk into a pharmacy and ask for it. Anytime your child or you have a prescription given to you for an opioid, you should also ask for the Narcan to be provided, because it's the easiest delivery system, unless the doctor, automatically does that, and they are supposed to do that now. The key is, I think every parent with a teen or college student, really all of us, should be carrying Narcan. We should have it available in our homes. I carry one in my purse. I have them in my cars, just in case we happen upon an overdose that we see. Maybe it's a stranger on the street. It's possible to run into overdoses anytime, any place anymore, and certainly in our homes. Our kids can be unexpectedly using this stuff, get into trouble. They come home after a party, they're dying in their rooms. We can overturn that overdose very simply. Our organization provides it. Anybody can go on to naloxoneforall.org as a website and actually have it mailed to you free of charge. So I would want everybody to know that. Get a Narcan kit. Come to us if you need to, and I'll provide our contact information.
And could you provide your contact information, April, and your
Yes.
website as well?
Yeah, should I type it into the chat?
No, just say it.
Okay,
the chat's actually more for us, yeah.
Yeah,
And
no
then
problem. So the initials are right there behind me, NCAPDA.org. And then if you go there, you can get our phone number, which is 925-480-7723, or you can send us an email message. My personal phone number, and I'm happy to give it out, is 925-980-5490. And I'm happy to accept any calls that people want to reach out to me with questions for.
Thank you so much. And yes, parents, for anyone who wants to reach out, because sometimes you really feel that you just need to talk to someone that's going to understand what you're going through, it's really helpful. Thank you so much, April. Monica, your closing thoughts.
I would just like to say that just say to yourself, I am enough, I am okay. And whenever you do not feel that way, there is help out there. There are alternative solutions to drugs and pills. There is a lot of techniques that can help you with anxiety and stress management and regulating your emotions. And if you'd like to reach me, my website is www.innersanctuary.xyz. My email is Monica, monica.kamran, KAMRAN, @innersanctuary.xyz. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that and all the great work that you're doing. And as I said, I'm definitely going to, right after this show, I'm going to definitely try what you have shown me. And I'll probably be the first one to call you. So thank you so much for that. Patty, your closing thoughts.
Hi, I had something in my mind that I kind of wanted to talk about more in relation to this time of COVID-19.
Yes, please.
we've seen statistics, alcohol use is up something like 55% in the third week of March when this all first started. Coincidentally, that's about the same time we all had to shelter in place, right? There's a cannabis market research firm who has studied the March 2020 market, and it's 160% increase from last March in cannabis.
Wow.
In our state, the ABC is the Alcohol Beverage Control, and they put out some what they called regulatory relief to kind of make alcohol an essential service. So alcohol is more accessible. You can have it delivered to your home now, whereas you could have wine or beer delivered, but now you can have a cocktail delivered from a restaurant to your home. And so ABC did an operation where they went out with enforcement, and guess what? Kids were getting that alcohol delivered. They were the ones accepting the delivery. So we have too much use going on. So, my statement is, kids are at the home more. Parents are with their kids more. It's back to the mantra. It's funny how we've all kind of kept saying this. Pay attention, have conversations, keep your eye out. Maybe now you're home working too, so you can catch what's being delivered. You see what's coming. You can find out if it's a vape device. You can answer the door for whatever is being delivered with your pizza or whatever it might be. So keep your eye open, keep the conversation going. And as far as keeping things out of the house, your medications, in addition to locking them up, when you're done with them, dispose of them. In our area, CVS has a drop box at every CVS pharmacy. Take them in, drop them off there, keep them out of hands. And listen to Monica, there is hope. There is a way to get through this, and it doesn't have to be with substances.
Mm-hmm.
No, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. And I knew alcohol sales had definitely increased, but I see all the lines at the grocery stores, but didn't realize it had gone up that much. Yes. Neelam.
Yeah. So I would like to give you some of my final thoughts. 130 Americans lose their life each day because of an opioid overdose. And if you make a correlation, it's like a jet plane crashing each day. If there was a jet plane crashing each day, wouldn't we do something about it? So why not have an open conversation in our families and our communities about this epidemic and control it? That are my final thoughts. And you can reach me on Facebook. You can find me, Neelam Chalia, and I'll be happy to connect you with other resources who are working on drug abuse and addiction. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for representing us at Mrs. America. It's wonderful. I can now say I had a conversation with a contestant from there. Yes, another feather in my cap. Ankita.
My final thoughts would be to all the parents, have a conversation with your child in a non-judgmental way, because South Asian parents a lot of times tend to be judgy. They tend to jump to a conclusion when their child says one little thing. So listen to them and have a civilized, non-argumentative conversation where we can talk like two adults and to just have like a good conversation, because that openness and that relationship between the child and the parent is something really important, because we all want your approval, but we don't want to be yelled at. We want to have a good conversation.
That was just so well said. It really was said. And I would also like to encourage young kids, if they're listening to the show, to always trust your parent, because we do get mad. I'm one of those Punjabi parents that starts getting mad and yelling and screaming. But at the same time, if you give us a few seconds to chill and actually be open with us, I think that's one of the biggest issues. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And special thanks to Radio Zindagi, of course, because, this is one radio station that brings the really sensitive topics that, again, people don't want to talk about. They think it's taboo, and it's not. This is much needed. COVID, not COVID. This is a conversation that has to keep going on, because we have to help everyone, not just adults and our children as well. So special thanks to Seba, Neeraj, and of course Ira, and of course all my panelists today. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to have had this conversation with you, and I hope that I can start implementing some of these things in my school as well. And I'll leave everyone with just one thought in mind, that remember, I said this earlier, addiction begins with the thought that something physical can fill the emptiness inside of us. So stop being so judgmental. Everyone is alone in some way or the other. And, don't judge a book by its cover. Look deeper inside and find out the reasons. And on that note, thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure. And I hope to have a sequel to this conversation very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.